Right, here we are. We are going to do another chapter of the Astrakhan's Feather. I know the lighting's not that brilliant and probably the sound isn't either. Hopefully it's a bit better than it was last time. Anyway, what we're going to talk about, I'll have to move this down here. What we're going to talk about is the next chapter of the Astrakhan's Feather. Quick recap. I'll tell you a funny thing. So, I don't know if you've seen it, but Bad Monkey. It's got Vince Vaughn in it. It's been on recently here on, I think on Prime Video. And it's great. It's based on a book by Carl Hiaasen, who was a journalist, or maybe still is, on the Los Angeles Times. And he writes really great, humorous stuff. You know, they're always like crime thrillers. So, but yeah, really good. Anyway, in Bad Monkey, after the first episode, you know, they do this thing where they go, the recap, right? Have the bloke doing the recap and he goes, really? Actually, I shouldn't probably do the accent. He goes, really? There's been one episode and you need a recap? Anyway, we've had a few episodes. I'm going to give you a quick recap. So, main character in this, Inspector Steve Christ. Right, he works in a town, a village really, called Bone Mountain. And he's on leave because something's happened, right, which we kind of get into. He's a bit of a slow burn, I admit. But you know what, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, he's off sick, I suppose, or he's on leave anyway. He's got two children, Tudor and Saxon. And what happens is, his place is taken by an acting inspector, Karen Allen, who's over from the UK. And we've also met so far Vinny, who is George's his real name, Vinny, who is Steve Christ's friend, right? So he's kind of in the background there. And we've also got Bob Mullins, who's the sergeant down at the police station in the village. And the village is actually based on Corrigan, right, which is in the Hawkesbury area in New South Wales here. Anyway, and Christ goes back home, but in the meantime also there's a girl, a young girl, 16 I think she is, I should know, shouldn't I, called Glory. And the thing with her is she's been thumbing a lift after she's been at a show all day, you know, like a country show thing. Thumbing a lift, eventually gets a lift. Ominous, that is, has a big storm bruise. So that's kind of where we are just at the moment. We'll pick up where Karen is still at the police station, and I'll just continue from there. And I may interject as we go. But here we are. So the Astrakhan's Feather, I think this is episode, let me just have a quick look at that. This is episode 4. It's not really sticking to the chapters here, but anyway, bear with me. All right. So the following day, Mullins took Karen on a tour of the command in an unmarked car. They finished on the banks of the Coal River, just down from the picnic area, where the river mumbled and murmured over rocks soft and brown as Darjeeling. It's true. A steady warm breeze flicked spray. The far bank, dense with mangroves, giant nesting fruit bats hanging vampire-like and chittering softly, gently climbed until it met the sheer cliff wall. It hurt Karen's neck when she took her eyes all the way to the top, where dense trees moved and creaked in the wind. Mullins pointed with his chin. "Oh, there's Notchy," he said. He looked upriver. "Water runs over coal seams as it comes down from the mountain, picking up dust." That is true. That's why it's called Coal River. "Not deep here," he says, "but wash your kids after they've spent the day frolicking. The bath water's black as tar." "Or coal," said Karen. Bob Mullins looked at her out the corner of his eye. "You could say," he said. Karen took a deep breath in through her nose and, lurking in the heat and humidity, smelt rot. Now, next chapter. Karen didn't mind night shift, even though she was the only officer on duty. She loved the station's solidity. Its creaks and groans in the night didn't bother her. She reckoned they were just part of the building, maybe its soul. "Geez, Karen, sometimes you are so poetic," she thought, as she vigorously brushed her teeth, grimacing at the old mirror. She was beginning to realise, after the first month on the job, she quite liked Bone Mountain, with its Georgian heritage buildings, soaring background of blue mountains, rushing rivers deep in the forest, and more fresh air up there than you could safely inhale. And when it came to crime, it was quiet. It was as different from London as you could get, and she reckoned that was no bad thing. Earlier, she'd been sitting at the desk, a cup of chamomile tea steaming by her elbow. Daily reports in front of her, actually nothing to report by the looks of it, and the air thick with heat. When Mullins stuck his head around the open door and leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Your road," he said, "where you're living?" "Grandview Lane," she said. "That is a real place, and this is a real story." I'm not gonna do the dialogue here. I'll just tell you the story. Okay. So back some years ago, myself and the wife, I think it was no, it wasn't before we had children. We had the kids and they were young. We went for a meal, and it was just before Christmas. Now Christmas here in Australia is hot, right? Opposite of the northern hemisphere, so it's hot and all that. But on this particular day, we went for this meal with these folks. So a couple of people we knew because their kids were at school with our kids, right? And one of them's a character in this called Jerome. I'll get onto that eventually. But point is, what happened is, so the people who were holding this meal, having this meal and invited us along, the woman owned a ballet school, which she had been running there, and then she got multiple sclerosis. When we met her, she was doing all right, but yeah, it was a problem. And so she closed her ballet school down, which was next door to the house, deep in the woods, right? Grandview Lane at that stage, it was just a dirt road. It's actually been tarmac now, a couple of years back. Anyway, this is what she told us. So, their son, sadly, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He had an accident. Nobody can explain it. He was driving his car, seemed to be on the wrong side of the road. He spent a bit of time in America, so maybe that was it. He hit another car, glanced off it, and he didn't have a seatbelt on. He was thrown from the car and died. Very, very sad. That was only probably 3 years ago. Anyway, this bit of the story, when it happened, obviously was still alive. Anyway, so what happened was, they're down Grandview Lane, and this massive storm comes through, right? It's dark, it's hot, because it's summer. The wind is blowing like nobody's business, right? And they hear a big tree come down. They hear this tree not far from the house it comes down. And they think, we better go out and see what we can do, because it's a dark lane, there are no lights. Somebody driving down there, if they're going, not too slow, they could whack into what they think is a tree that's come down. So they get in the car, get out the drive, and it's just there, right? It's pretty much there. The wife sits in the car with the lights on, engine running. And the husband, and he's a company director. I'm saying all this because these are not dumb people at all by any stretch of the imagination. They get out, the son and the husband, they get out and they've got a chainsaw and they start chainsawing the tree. She's sitting there with the car lights on so they can see what they're doing. Then this bloke comes walking along, right? Long coat, long dark coat. He comes along and he starts helping them. He starts moving wood out of the way as well, and all of that. Anyway, they get it cleared. And the wind is buffeting the car, and it starts raining as well, right? Real storm, lightning, thunder, everything. And the three of them are working there. The son, the husband, and the bloke who's come along. Anyway, after they finish, they get back in the car, and, they're all, smelling of ozone, I say in this, and I'm sure they were. They get back in the car, and the wife says, "Oh, that was the boys in the back, sitting in the back." When I say boy, he was a young man. He's sitting in the back. The husband's in the front passenger seat. She says, "Well, that was really nice of that man to give you a hand." They both look at her, and the son says, "What do you mean?" And she said, the man that came along, the man who had the long coat on, giving you a hand." The husband and the son look at each other, and the son says quietly, "Mum, there was no one else there." Right? Honestly true. And she says, she told us, she said, "That's Captain Bowen," because that's the place. It's not called Bone Mountain, it's called Bowen Mountain. She said, "That was Captain Bowen." And she said, "He appears. If he wants you to stay on the mountain, he'll help. If he doesn't, he won't." Honestly, it sent goosebumps down my spine, And these are people who are not given to fancy at all. Anyway, there you go. So Bob Mullins basically tells Karen that same story, right? And so I don't need to go through all of that. But anyway, she says, I'm just twirling through it now because we finished all that. He had long blonde hair and a long coat. All right, that's what he was, and he was out there. Anyway, that was apparently the ghost of Lieutenant Bowen, or Lieutenant Bone, as we would say, because that's what we're talking about now. Anyway, Karen is there, and she's in doing night shift. And also, this storm comes along. Now, up the mountain, there's Christ. His kids are in bed, and we rejoin him. The storm rattled the house, shuttered the windows, crockery jigged, hopped and tinkled in the glass-fronted kitchen cupboards. I've got to tell you, it does. When you have a really big storm up there, which we do a lot, that's what happens, right? It's bloody frightening. Now, times like this, Jenny, that's Christ's wife, who's not around, would read softly to the boys in the big bedroom as they snuggled down and kept their bears closed, and the wind whipped the trees against the house in a frenzy that made them shiver with a child's fright. Christ would lean against the door jamb just outside the room and listen and smile as her soothing words sent them to sleep, but of course she didn't do that anymore. Since Vinny had called, Christ had been sacking beer. He'd never been much of a drinker, but the past 8 months he'd been guzzling like he was chasing an award. Frankie Goes to Hollywood on the sound system, volume cranked right up, Christ crooning along. I'll protect you from the hooded claw, keep the vampires from your door. The kids would sleep through anything. Back when Sax was being born on the lounge floor, this is true, Jenny screaming blue murder, Christ pacing and useless and waiting for the ambulance, Tudor slept right through until the following morning. It's true. When Christ returned from the hospital, shattered at 7:30 a.m, gently rousing Jenny's friend Sandy and whispering, it's a boy. He'd always remember a lazy smile as she came up out of sleep and off the sofa and hugged him. Always fancied her. Anyway, there you go, that's another story. But it's no story, actually. That never happened and went anywhere. Christ shrugged off his Paul Rock shirt, bare-chested, bottle of Cooper's in one hand, the other curled around his imaginary partner, dancing and singing in the darkness, a storm thundering and rumbling. Several Coopers later, fresh one in his hand, he'd stumbled out onto the dark front veranda, a story up, swaying with beer, the lights of the town twinkling far below, stormy hot air blowing a bully breeze. Behind him, a small smoky bat, this is true as well, perched on the redwood plank in his spot every summer night, chittering softly, catching mozzies. Come morning, he'd be gone, returning silently every night for another feed. I love that bat, actually. Never did me any harm, but he was always up there every night. For years, a couple of years. Not there anymore. Christ breathed deep, set his head spinning. Old timers said from up here you could smell the sea 80 miles away. Christ leaned on the wooden rail, his hand missed, his vision started to wobble and then spin. His stomach churned. He doubled over in sudden stabbing pain over the balcony rail, nearly pitching forward onto the driveway down below, guts exploding, emptying beer into rapid volcanoes of puke splattering on the brick drive below. He sobbed rapidly and spat, throat scorching, an instant headache yammering behind his eyes while the sky seemed to tilt. Lightning split the darkness. Christ looked up, gasping, ears tearing. He saw a man on the edge of the forest, across the road, standing alone in the wind, in a long oiled coat, his hair flowing behind him, long gun over his shoulder. He slowly swiveled his head Christ's way, but then the lightning was gone, and all that remained was a skeletal impression burned on Christ's retinas. He breathed deep several times and almost fainted. He staggered back inside, the screen door slapping behind him. The sheet was on the sofa, 2 pillows, a slash of lightning lit the room. Jenny stood in one corner. Christ shivered, dropped down on the sofa, rolling on his side, eyes scrunched shut, turning away from her, clumsily dragging Sax's blue wiggles blanket over him, whimpering in the darkness. Above the storm he heard a board creak, felt her hot breath hiss against his cheek, raising his stubble on end. His teeth chattered as he rocked himself and shook his head and gritted his teeth to stop them clicking together like a madman. He should have tried to clamber the stairs to the bed, but he couldn't. He wouldn't. It might have been cleaned, but he could still smell her blood. Right, I think we'll leave it there now. I know that's a bit short, but yeah, there you go. Stay tuned. I'll try and do another one tomorrow. Take care out there, folks. whether it's evening, afternoon, morning, or whatever it is in your neck of the woods. Take care. Thank you.